If you're on the hunt for a bargain, this is your video. We're looking at all the cheapies in NRL fantasy, and we're going to go through our view on how they're going to score and what their job security is like and whether you should buy them in fantasy. Now, Biz, welcome back to the show. What's your thoughts on the cash cow landscape this year?
I think it's more of a trap landscape this year, Longy.
Oh.
I will say that I love them. I've got like 10 or 11 of them. Not confident in any of them. I would say that looking through this list, this year we've had the most cash cows in a long time. But other than maybe one of them, I don't trust any of them to be named week 2. So there's very little job security. I think the winners and losers for this year's fantasy will be based on who selectively picks the right ones and avoids the big traps.
Big time. I'm with you there. So let's talk through them. Let's talk through the traps, cash cows, and the guys you have to have. First up, Isaiah Yongi. This one's pretty straightforward. So he's about a 40 average in reserve grade, comes into a parasite where he's looking very good in the trial games. And that one game he played at Penrith last year, he had great stats. So very strong meters, very strong tackle breaks. Probably going to be about a 40 average this year. I would say he's rock solid. And if you don't have him, you're not playing fantasy right.
Yeah, I think you have to have him. He's probably the only cow on this list that I am confident, regardless of the result, as long as he doesn't get injured, he will be there week 2. And I think, he'll have average 40. I think he'll have some down games, but you'll see that against the Tigers in the second preseason game for the Eels that he scored 55. Beautiful individual try off the scrum. We'll have highlight moments. And still a young guy, so a lot of upside, running off a team that has already come out and said they want to play a fast attacking brand of football. So I think you have to have him, especially given that the wing fullback position this year is very barren in my eyes.
So he's where it ends in terms of the clean cut.
Yep.
Cash cows there. But Peter Marmazelis is next on the ranks. Now, Marmazelis, there's two stories here for me. On one side, he is a fantastic fantasy producer. So 50 average when he starts, had great stats in the trial game as well. But on the downside, he's not blowing sort of the ball off the game, not blowing people's eyes off in terms of the eye test, right? So I look at him and think he's one of those guys who might lose minutes at some point to Jamie Humphreys, or they're talking about signing another hooker. So the job security is a bit dicey for him.
Yeah, he has definitely fantasy-wise performing in the preseason, but if you take the fantasy side out of it, hasn't looked great. My worry for him is that we'll talk about Jamie Humphrey down the track, but they signed Lewis Dodd reportedly to a $700K contract. And even if he hasn't played well in the preseason, following round 1, I think he'll come back into the side. And with Humphrey having a really strong preseason and already potentially having that 14 role, I think it eats into Marmazelis' minutes. And if the plays kind of favors more Jamie style, then, well, he could lose his starting spot. So I think he's probably the one I'm more confident on, having a potential 2, 3, 4 week run at the very least, but much less guaranteed that he's there starting, playing big minutes in week 2. But I think it's a case that you can't overthink it. He scores too well to skip. So don't try anything smart. Just get him 45% ownership or whatever. If the ship goes down, just everyone will go down with it.
Yep. Must have, but keep an eye on the risk there and have some backup at hooker. Jack Bird's the next guy here. Now, he shook everything up when he was named on the bench in this trial, but he's come out and said he wants that number 13 jersey. Came out in the trial game and played pretty good footy, scored a nice try. For me, he passed the eye test, but I know you had some observations about where he was playing in that game.
Yeah, so he came out, scored with his second touch, very soft try. Looked really good. I thought, good line speed, played strong in defense. Played center for the second half, given that Naden went off. Now, here's my thing. A lot of people are on Stafford Toa, who is in our cash cow list down the track. But there's a chance that with Naden out, Bird actually goes to center, ruling Bird out of contention and also Stafford Toa out of contention. So knocking out, 2 potential cash cows or 2 birds with one stone. Set that up perfectly. Anyway,
okay.
Anyway, I just think that there's a chance that he plays a center role, or he'll kind of have the old school, almost Orbison role where they'll play him through the forwards, but first one on the edges. If something goes down, Alex Twal looked pretty solid in the middle, starting at lock. I think you have to have him, but again, could be disappointing even coming off the bench and playing in the middle, but has historically pretty good PPM at lock. So have him, a lot of faith, probably not.
I'll throw a few things in. He's a 54-point average when he plays big minutes at lock. You could take that and say, all right, maybe he plays 60 minutes off the bench. that's still probably in the 40s. So
Yeah.
I am very keen to start with him. He's sitting in my team. Unless things go really badly, I'm probably going to start with him regardless. But him playing at center, you talked about it before, it's not a great situation. So
Yeah,
run Jack Bird right now, but keep an eye on
yeah,
team list.
I would rather have him on the bench than at center, and I think he could potentially play like the Josh Curran type of role where he comes in after 20 and plays long minutes after that. So if that's the case, he's a great buy.
I'll pay that. Now, we have been doing a bit of training on saying this name before the video. So I'm going to throw to you, Biz, for your pronunciation.
Yeah. Okay. Mark Nawanga Nitawase.
There it is. Mark
Did I get
Nawani
that?
Wase. That's good.
Okay,
That's
that's
good. So
good.
21%
Thank you.
own. He's a bit of a tricky one, though. So this Roosters team is
tricky,
not what
yeah.
it used to be. He's 350K, and it's basically been said that Billy Smith will take one of the center spots in round 2 when he's back from injury. So is it Mark who gets dropped out, or is it Robert Toyer? Right? That's the big question. And anyone who tells you they know the answer probably is lying to you. We really don't know. But in that last trial game, Noani Dawase was pretty strong, and Toya was torn to shreds by Bradman Best. Not all his fault, but he was on the end of a lot of those runs. So I think Mark is probably the 60% chance to hold the spot. Then I look at him at 350K, not a noted fantasy producer, and just think maybe this is one we need to let slide through and we can focus on one of the other centers instead.
Yeah, if he wasn't available at wing fullback, I probably wouldn't consider him. And the reason for that is, like I said, there's not many really options at wing fullback. At center at 350K, there's just so many base price centers this year at 250K or below. The problem with Mark is that, look, it's really hard to tell because in week 1, Mark played poorly and Robert Toyer went off. And that kind of flipped in week 2. But the problem is with Mark that in week 2, he had bad cramps 60 minutes in. And Robbo came out and said, I should have taken him off at that point. Can you really afford to start a center who can't play out a game? And at the start of the season, it's not a great look. Now, I know it's preseason and whatnot, but if they're questioning his fitness at the start of the season, Billy Smith comes week 2, week 3, I think it's a chance he gets the spot. On the flip side, I think the contract is a lot more valuable for Mark Nawanga Nitawase. He's an ex-Wallaby Union guy. They wouldn't have got him for cheap, whereas Robert Toyer will be on a much cheaper contract. So from a mental perspective, I think they'll give him a longer leash, but it really could be an aspect of who plays better week to week. And they don't have a easy matchup week 1 versus the Broncos. So at 350K with so many options, I think I'll let it slide.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And we'll talk about Toyer in a bit as well when we get to the cheap guys. So right now it's that 300 to 400K section. Then we'll go into the sub 300. Munro is another one. So I think most teams, when I'm seeing how they're configured, they're kind of having to choose between Nawangani Dawase, Tyrone Munro, or potentially Tamale because they need that extra wing fullback. And they're sort of 3 that are at that lower price that are relatively attractive. So Munro is one who was in my team all the way through the preseason up until Latrell's injury. Now, he has very low base stats, but a big potential for attacking stats. The issue is he's in a south side that got destroyed in the trial. Don't have Cody Walker, don't have Latrell Mitchell, don't have Cam Murray, and I think will struggle. So for that reason, I'm not jumping on, but I could see him being a reasonably solid slow burn through the year. And Souths do have some fixtures where he could potentially exploit them too.
I agree with all of what you said. He was in my team until Latrell went down because Latrell is a great ball player to the wingers. Now, my player comp for him, an exact player comp for him last year was Jack Bostock, 300K last year or 297K. Similar low base stats, but can score a lot of tries. Similar kind of frame profile. Similar kind of draw to start the year, whereas Aaron Bostock last year had a very simple run. First 5, I think Souths have a few good games up front. I missed Jack last year. I don't know if I want to miss the same kind of run. We remember how crazy that was. He kind of went up to 450, 500K pretty quickly.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's going to happen again, but it's in the realms of possibility because this is a guy who can score a hat trick or a double and score 50, 60 points. But again, like he played on the Charity Shield and scored 8 points as well. So I agree. I don't love how the Souths look right now, but has potential to boom out. But I think but it's kind of teetering on the edge right now.
Would you say the question is, do you believe in South Sydney? Because to me, that's what this is. And if you think Souths will go okay at the start and then Latrell comes back 6 rounds in and lights him up, like you could maybe just start with him and sort of let him sit there as wing fullback depth.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. If you think Souths are not going to lose a beat this year offensively, then just pick him, because he'll just. The Souths wingers are usually a pretty fruitful place for fantasy. Like they fall over a lot of tries, like Alex Johnson, like Tane Milne, like all these guys. They just, we've seen plenty of guys just kind of less talented than Munro really thrive in those spots. So the opportunity is there. It's just, without Trell, without Cody at full fitness, it's hard to make a bet on. But if you're betting on them, get him, I think.
Rate it. So he's got to keep an eye on. Corey Pakes is up next, and we've talked about Pakes a bit. I'm not a believer. Like, I like the dual position. I don't mind the starting spot at the Broncos if he gets that, but his PPM historically is really poor. He's a 32 average in 57 minutes when he starts at hooker, and that 32 points is comprised of 37 tackles and a bunch of negative stats. So he's an accumulator when he's on the field, just in defensive stats, basically. And he really needs bigger minutes. And I just don't see him getting that role at Brisbane where he's going to play more than 60 minutes. So for mine, bit of a trap, not really the guy. Moser might come back at some point reasonably soon as well. Billy Walters was the starter last year. Like there's not that much to indicate that Pakes is going to steal a big role. So for that reason, I'm skipping him.
Yeah, I've had him in my squad for a lot of the time, but I've taken him out. I agree with all those reasons. I think Billy Walters has played really well in the preseason as well. Sorry, so has Corey, but I think Billy's been really solid enough to earn a lot of minutes. Even in his, Queensland Cup Hooker of the Year season last year, where he was playing about 80 minutes every game, averaged 41. And if that's like close to an 80-minute game, then in a 50-minute game, which is what I'm expecting, like he'll average 30, like he'll have some value, but when there's so many options this year at 300K and risk of losing a spot any given week, like I'll just skip, like to take him, but whatever. He's not going to burn you with a 50 average.
Yep, hard skip. And that's where Mama Zealous is more interesting because he's a PPM guy. I'll throw Jesse Arthurs to you. Do you have any thoughts on this guy?
It's really interesting. He seems very popular for a guy that's been there, done that many years. Every year is kind of at this price, and everyone's like, yeah, Jesse Arthurs. But I never really understood why. Like, I'm not seeing anything different. Like, I know he's had like some, had a really good kind of rep season last year, and he looked good in, the preseason rep games this year. But what's
he played
really
that
changed?
Grand final, and he was awesome as well in 2023. Like everyone made the same case, that he's turned the corner. I'm with you. It's not that exciting. I view him as very similar to like a Seb Chris. Everyone gets excited about him once a year as well. Like these guys aren't fantasy producers, so
no,
I'm a skip on them.
Like we've seen years where he's been in like a really good team, and this is just his fantasy score. I've seen so many good teams, like it's 20 good players plus Jesse Arthurs, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like there's so many options. You don't go for Jesse Arthurs. We've seen what he is.
Yeah, 350K, and he's not a better scorer than say Stafford Toa, who's 250K, right? So yeah, easy skip for that one. Tamale is a bit more interesting. So there's two values to Tamale, and then there's some risk. I'll let you talk about the risk, but I'll jump on the value here. So first thing is he's a bit of a beast, right? Very hyped from reserve grade, real tackle buster, attacking player. Comes onto a Canberra side where they do support their wingers with attacking opportunities. So we have seen Rapana in the past absolutely kill it on the wing. Before he sort of entered his late 30s, but at that point he was killing it. So Tamale is a guy you can plug in there. You get dual position out of him, and the big thing is you also get that loophole potential. So Tamale sits in my side right now. I'm going to do team reveals in a bit and a loopholing video too, but he is central to my loophole strategy because if I put him in the emergency 6 spot, I put a Titan in my starting side, he subs straight into the wing fullback spot if I decide to leave it that way. So plays in Vegas, you can use him for a loophole. He is going to be a reasonably solid scorer, but obviously, and I'll let you talk about this, there's a bit of job security risk.
Yeah, like I love the talent. I love the fantasy potential. I think he averages 40 plus in Reggie's. I think he had the most meters out of any player in Reggie's last year, most line breaks, most tackle breaks. Like it sounds like absolutely a fantasy stud in the making. Problem is, Ricky Stewart loves Albert Hopewadiak. Any Raiders fan? I love going through player forums and team forums. I talked about this in one of the other videos. And if you look through the greenhouse, like shout out to any of the Raiders fans who use the greenhouse, which is the Raiders forums. Everyone does not like Albert Hopewadiak in the squad, but Ricky will continuously pick him. I think Albert Hopewadiak is a solid player. he's having a kid. He's not going to Vegas, and kind of the argument is, Tamale has been training in the preseason over Albert Hopewadi, but is that because they're training with a focus on round one? I think there's a chance of that, but I think talent-wise, Tamale has shown that he has the potential to take that spot and make it his own. So it's not the end of the world if he plays week one. Like, say, for example, you have a Jaden Campbell or like an AJ Brimson who you just need someone to play 1 week for. Not the worst to plug in. And then you can use him as a loop, as you talked about, going forward. And if he holds the spot, even better.
I like it, and I like backing the talent. I'm with you there. So that's why he's in my team as well. Like, lock it in. Just be careful, though. If you're starting with him and you have players who are on round 2 or round 4 buys, which are the popular ones, so Melbourne Storm players or Newcastle Knights players in particular, then at that stage, if Tamale is not in the team and you have Marzu and Ponga on a buy, for example, you're cooked. Like, you're absolutely cooked at wing fullback, and you have to use all these trades on other wing fullbacks, and they're going to be rubbish, the people you buy. So you're just going to be behind the 8 ball. So just keep an eye on that. If you're running Tamale, you almost have to be a little bit more cautious about your players who are coming up with buys. So that's the one thing to think about. But here's a textbook back the talent example there. So he's an easy shout. I'll run through a few of these other guys here pretty quick, because then we're going to jump to the cheap players, which I'm actually really excited about as well. Finafuyaki is really simple. If he looks like getting the 80-minute role, we like him. It'll be based on team lists. I don't think we need to go into that one too deeply. Jamie Humphries, you talked about this bit before. 350K, comes in off a great game in the trials where he absolutely tore up, but he tore up against sort of the backups there. There'd already been some subs and that kind of thing. Had a good game for Manly last year. That 46 average indicates that. Only in 5.5% of the teams. If he was 250K, I'd get on him. But at 350K, it's one that I'm probably going to let slide through as a pure half, because we have so many other options that we're going to talk about in the sub 300K section.
Yeah, I think even at 250K, I'm not 100% sure I'd take him, just on the fact that, like I said, if Lewis, it's not so much his price, it's more the contract they've given Lewis Dodd. And I think it's very hard for a club to give an import a 700K odd contract reported. I don't know the actual figure. That's what reports are.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
And then not play him week one based off a couple of preseason games. I don't see them not rushing Dodd back week 2. And at that point, Humphries kind of becomes like a 20, 30-minute bench player, unless you're thinking he'll overtake Mamazelis. So my plan is let this one slide. He could score a 50 week 1, get to 400K. And then if he overtakes Mamazelis week 2, well, then I can just pivot Mamazelis to Humphries in week 2 or 3 and see how that plays out. But I just think there's so many options here. I just can't envision a world where the Souths give Dodd this, like, the cut after a preseason.
He's just such a stud scorer, though. That's the one thing, right? Because if he was 250K, I'd be starting with him 100%. And it's not because of the halves spot round 1. Although I think that will launch his scoring against the Dolphins too, so it's a good matchup. It's more that if he moves to the bench, he's a unit. Like, look at those biceps on the picture there. Yeah. He's an absolute unit. They've lost Cam Murray as well, so they've lost a bit of that leg speed in the middle. He might steal some minutes at lock. He might steal some minutes at hooker. He is the first drop for a halves pairing of Dodd, who looks a bit shaky, and Cody Walker, who's carrying an injury, and he's about 35 years old, right? So he's a guy who's going to get opportunities, and the stash could pay off. Like, he could be a guy who jumps to 700K. That's the play there. But he could also totally ruin your team. And then you're carrying 7 halves, and one of them's a red dot and Jamie Humphries, and you don't have any cover for other positions, and you're screwed later. So I'm not going to start with him, but I totally see the picture where he's an absolute stud. And if you want to back the talent, if you think he's going to earn a spot, so not necessarily you, Biz, but everyone else we're hanging out with here, then I don't mind you taking this gamble. It's one of those ones that won't be taken by most teams, but you can do something different and get on him. So a bit of a Tyron Wishart kind of equivalent, right?
Yeah.
Because Wishart had 2 weeks originally. People bought him. It was a objectively poor buy, Wishart originally, but then it turned out awesome because he just kept finding ways into the team. So that's what I think Humphries could be, but it's not guaranteed. Wishart's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, and now that you've put it like that, I definitely agree with all that you said. Even if he had a high PPM 30, 40-minute roll at 250K, that's great. But a high PPM roll, for 30, 40 minutes at 350K, it's not as enticing. So 100% agree with everything you said.
Yeah, it's that price that's a bit tricky. We got more guys that we'll talk about here, but I want to go to the cheapies first because these are really important. So starting off with the cheapies. All right, tearing into the cheapest of the cheap. So our 0 to 300K players, these are the guys that you really need to get right in your fantasy side. So really pay attention here, guys. First up, Sandon Smith in 41% of teams. There's a lot of people talking about not starting with Sandon Smith. I'm not seeing many teams that don't have him, but a lot of people are talking about it because of his poor form in the trials. Biz, are you shaken up at all by that trial form, or are you sticking strong with Sandon?
Look, I don't particularly care about the trial form. One, it's a trial. Two, at 250K, playing in a pretty good attacking side with the goals, it's fine. Like, he doesn't have to score 40. He's priced at 19. He has to average 30. It's not that hard to, get to 25. Even if he
Historical
doesn't
average,
get
by the way, is 40 for him in the
exactly.
hub.
So, and I know Townsend is a dominant playmaker, but Townsend looked pretty bad against the Knights. So did everyone. So I'm not singling out on him, but I think, look, there's enough attacking upside. But all he has to do is fluke a try or fall onto a loose ball and run 30 meters with a couple of offloads.
Maybe a full field intercept try like he had last
Exactly.
week.
Like he did,
Yeah.
he missed a ton of tackles. Roosters looked terrible, but he still got to 43. If you did that round one and you missed him, like just because you wanted to like get too smart, like you're going to look stupid. So he probably has pretty decent job security just because Roosters don't really have many options. Like, I don't think they're going to give Zach Docker-Clay a go. Sandon Smith has kind of been pretty solid for them when he stepped up. So just get him. It's not pretty. Like it doesn't. They don't always have to be pretty. Sometimes you just be like, okay, well, it's there. Just get him and go.
I'm with you, man. Don't get cute. They don't have Joey Manu either, who puts pressure on the 6 jersey. Like they don't have any options really to step into that role. So Sandon Smith, don't get too cute. Get him in. 250K is a great price. Rob Toyer, absolute base price, 230K. Now we talked about him before. Reserve grade average is 150 meters a game and 7 tackle breaks a game. So that looks great. Looked a bit dodgy in the Newcastle game, but again, all these Roosters did look bad in that game. So I'm not reading into it too much. He faces a competition for his starting role between himself and Nwangani Dawase as Billy Smith is set to come back in round 2. That's the big problem here. But even with that risk, I would say he's still a guy you want to start with. So big fantasy upside is the first drop at worst case. So even if he gets dropped, he's the first reserve for the wing and center spots for the Roosters. So he's the guy who will come in if there's any injuries. And they're a team that has Billy Smith coming back from injury. So I think Rob Toyer is one of those guys you get in. And if he loses his spot, I'm probably going to keep him on my bench and use him as a loophole for a while, just trusting that he'll get back into the starting side at some point. So for me, he's a firm buy, but I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
Look, at 230K with his pedigree and they've hyped him up. He's had a bad injury run. Like he looked really good in the first trial. Got destroyed by Dylan Lucas, Bradman Best, and Ponga in the second trial. But like that's going to happen to a lot of much more experienced centers this year. So it just be like that sometimes against the Knights when they're firing. Look, I think you got to have it because he could come out and score 40, 50 at 230K week 1. And without Stags, he's going to be running at either potentially Shibasaki or Mariner, who aren't noted. Mariner's obviously really good in attack. Shibasaki's a bit of a journeyman. But neither of them are defensive stalwarts. I would say Shibasaki's pretty solid. But
I wonder
for
if
an attacking player...
Think about the edge there. It could be I don't know which side's the right. I've got to look into this, but it could be like Jezewski, Adam Reynolds, Shibasaki. Like that is a channel that a guy like him is going to tear through.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is a chance for attacking upside, even if the defensive potential, we've got like Brisbane should have a good side
First
this year.
trial game, 20 tackles, 0 misses though. Like defense is there.
Yeah, I think he's more of the type that I haven't seen a lot of him, but just from the stats and the preseason, it looks like he's the type. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles in the like a fantasy sense. He might make some bad defensive reads that leave gaps in the line, but it's not leading to a -2 sort of situation. So as a fantasy owner, you don't, if he has a gaping hole next to him and Ponga or Bradman Best runs through untouched, well, it's not -2 at least. Not great for his job security, but you kind of get where I'm going at. So I think you have to have him, like, long story short. And if he flops, then so be it.
Yep, I'm with you. Must have, easy option. I'll throw you Royce Hunt here because for me, I'm a bit uninspired. The PPM's not great. I doubt he gets 40 plus minutes, and he's not in my side at present.
Yeah, I mean, I'll counter that. I personally think his PPM is pretty solid. I think he almost scores at 1 point a minute when given the minutes, but he's never really had the minutes. And I was hoping that coming to the Tigers, fresh start, they'd give him more minutes. But watching the trial against the Eels, he came on after 28 minutes, played 12 minutes, and I didn't really see him the second half. So if he's
It
playing,
hurt in that game as well. It's
yeah,
not going
like
to
if
rule out
he,
for round one, but it's dodgy.
yeah, but if he's only playing 12 minutes in the first half and you kind of extrapolate that to the second half, then it's 25 minutes, max 30 minutes, and he's kind of priced at 22. You want a 32 plus average, then you need a 1 point per minute kind of PPM on 32 minutes to get there, which is quite difficult. So I think you just let it slide. I think there's better options, especially with all the 230, 250K players.
I'm with you. Hard avoid. Easy play there. You never want him in your 17 either. That's the issue with him. Jackson Purdue, have you got strong thoughts about him? Because 27% of coaches, a lot of teams with him in them.
He's a really difficult one to think about. He kind of boomed towards the end of the preseason. They've got Zach Laybart coming back. They've got quite a few center options, like Braden Burns can play there. Vailea's obviously there. Just a lot of guys who can play there. And he's really a half that's playing at center.
Yep.
So statistically, don't have much to go off. I think he's played 2 games at center. One was 30 with a try. One was 19 without a try. So what does he really end up? He's priced at 19, so you want a 30 average. Does he get there? Before I saw this week's trial, I would have said doesn't seem like it. But after seeing this week's trial, he's got enough attacking upside where he's one of those players that probably doesn't average too much, but I can see a very high peak in terms of cash generation just on the back of like a fluke 60, on the back of like some really attacking set. And even if his average is low, his peak for dollar value could be pretty high. So I think I'm going to have to take the punt. And I think Manly aren't the worst matchup week 1. I think it'll be a high-scoring affair.
So for me, it's probably, I agree with all your points there, but I'm not going to start with him, most likely. There are a lot of centers to have, and a guy like Robert Toya is much more attractive to me. Then there's other guys we can talk about as well. But, you know, if Kautoga, for example, starts at Parramatta, that's a guy I've got in over Jackson Purdue as well. So I'm looking at him and just thinking the fantasy production is not going to be great. And the Cowboys, I don't think they're going to look as good as they did in that trial game in the regular season. So I'm skipping him, but I totally understand all your points. He could totally fluke up some big scores. But we also have to mention that Laybart might come and steal that spot. I think Tom Chester's out for a while, so that's not a threat there. But there's just a few too many issues that I can't ignore here. Tom Duffy. And again, look, I'll throw to you, man, because I've been taking a few of the openings, but Tom Duffy is one we're both excited about. So give us your thoughts.
I think he's absolute talent. He had a very hyped up, Queensland Cup or reserves last year, goal kicking, 50 odd points in the trial, 50 odd average in the reserves. I think he's the half of the future there with Dearden, and Clifford being hurt, helps him. And I think he's the type of player that, kind of like Galvin last year, I think he'll have a similar season to Galvin, like kind of injuries and just good preseason opened the path for him, and he'll never let it go. And I think he's going to be in for a big season. I honestly think at his price and scoring potential with the goals, he should be the number 1 owned player in fantasy this year, or pretty close to it. So yeah, just get him in.
I was going to say the same thing. He's my number 1 choice out of these halves that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because Jack Cole's next as well. Like there's a bunch of good halves at that cheap price point. He's my boy. Goal kicker looked fantastic in that trial game. So passed the eye test. That's what I was looking for there. Because if he looked rubbish in that trial game, they don't mind Clifford. They don't mind Clifford at all. So they could bring Clifford back in. But he looked good in that game. I think he's locked it down. I think he'll be the guy. The risk is that Clifford is also a goal kicker. So they're not married to having Duffy there. That's one thing to keep in mind. But if he does get dropped, it's probably going to be some low fantasy scores anyway. So you'll be happy enough selling him at that point. So I agree with you. Must have. Got to get him in. Jack Cole's another one that comes in here. And is it as simple as he's the half at Penrith, he's won the spot over Blaze Talangi, he's going to be that guy reasonably long term? Or do you think there's a bit of risk here that Blaze might come in at some point because of that off-season shoulder surgery, just delaying him a little bit?
Yeah, definitely a high risk. I mean, they've gone out to get Blaze. They've wrestled him away from Parramatta. It was a bit of a bidding war for him, and they kind of Blaze came out and said the opportunity to play next to Cleary was too much of a lure for him. I would suspect that Blaze is really firmly in the seat to play in the halves, or he wouldn't have left Para easily given the opportunity they gave him last year. So I don't think he's far off at all. The flip side on this is I think the NRL fantasy team have mispriced him this year. Like, he should not be 250K. Like, he averaged 33 last year. He should be 400 plus K. So I think the fact that he's at base price means you have to have him. He's a guy who makes 25 plus tackles at half. When he plays 6, he's averaged 44 next to Luai, who was playing a dominant half role. I think, look, again, it's a situation where he might not be there week 2, but the points upside for the price is too high to miss out. And I'd rather trade him out than catch up to trade him in. So he's in my team.
Vegas loophole too. He's sitting in my emergency 5 spot, so he is a loophole option 100%. Now, we talked about Munro already. He fits into both categories. Takura is in a lot of teams that I'm reading at the moment, and my advice is sell, sell, sell. So Broncos, what I think they're going to do for round 1 is they're going to carry a bench that looks like bench hooker, bench second rower, 2 props. Now, their prop rotation, that means it has 4 spots for props, right? It's 2 starting props, 2 bench guys. You got Payne Haas, you got Pat Carrigan in the starting team. And then my assumption is Corey Jensen and Xavier Wilson on the bench. So I don't see where Takura steps into this and gets minutes at all. And if he is the 17th man, I don't see him getting meaningful minutes. Now, the counter is, you might have seen him in the trial game. He played really well in that game, scored a try, all that sort of stuff. I'm excited for the future, but I'm just not excited for this year.
Yeah, the future is not yet here for Ben. He'll play a big role in, like, maybe during Origin, he's a great buy, but I can only really see 20 minutes, 25 minutes for him here. Like, so priced at 19, he really needs 35 plus minutes to be worth it, and I don't see him getting that.
The counter you could make here is maybe you start with him if he starts round 1 or when he gets into the team, and you hold him through the Origin period. So if you got a spot in like round 9 in the 17 jersey, I might grab him at that stage just as an Origin guy, because we saw Xavier Wilson last year step up in that period, and we could potentially see Corey Jensen, Pat Carrigan, and Payne Haas all in Origin this year. So that's one counter, but for round 1, don't get him. Jesse McLean is a hard sell. I don't think we need to cover this too deeply, but he is not in the team for round 1. They've chosen to run Garner at center and Alamotti on the wing to cover that wing spot for Brian Toe instead. So he's a couple of pegs down the list. 15.4% of coaches need to sell him. Pacific Tonga, do you have any interest in this guy? Because for me, the Dragons team is pretty congested, and there's a lot of guys who are soaking up minutes. So I don't see huge upside for him.
I mean, if he gets named, I know he's a hyped up talent, but the chances of him being named are pretty low. I mean, they've gone out and got Emre Gula. They've got a lot of guys who can play middle and edge, like Eisenhuth, Raymond Fatella Mariner. They've got the Couchman boys who have looked very good in the preseason. Reported to be getting Clemmer. A lot of congestion in the middle. I think he could be one to watch later in the year, but like as it stands, unless he miraculously comes out and wins a starting role, I'm not looking at him, because I think even if he wins a bench spot, it's like a 20-minute role.
Yep, I agree with that. Got to skip him. We talked about Pegs, Tamale already. Puru is not starting round 1. Joash Papali'i, it's a case of whether he gets a spot at some point, but he doesn't have it at this stage. Amone is interesting, so he is not looking likely at all to get any sort of minutes, so I would sell him. The hype is dead. Owen Paddy, I'm going to throw him across to you, man, because you've done some research and he's currently in your side.
Yeah, look, I think he's not as owned as I expected to be. Look, the thing with Owen Paddy is supreme attacking talent, but I dug pretty deep into his stats and reserve grade, and it's an interesting situation, whereas you'll kind of see that hookers that come into first grade are dominating as starting hookers in the reserve grade team. Not the case for Owen Paddy. Owen Paddy was an interchange player for the New South Wales Cup team, or the knock-on effect team. So it's not like he's coming from a 70, 80-minute role into a bench role here. He's a Reggie bench player going into a first-grade bench player. Now, what I love about Owen Paddy, though, is he averaged about 32 minutes for Reggie's last year and scored about 20 points in an average. So he's priced at 17. He needs about 27 points to get that 10 points of value, which he should be targeting in cash cow. So he really needs 30 minutes. I not guaranteed 30 minutes week 1. I suspect 20, 25, 30 minutes. But I think with his talent, I mean, the Raiders have thrown out Starling, Levi, like Wolford, like a bunch of guys over the years. They have never loved their hooker. Paddy has shown that he could be the hooker of their future. And what I love about Paddy is not only does he like in the 32, 33 minutes he averaged in Reggie's, he averaged 26 tackles. So he likes to tackle, but he had tries in there. Like he seems like a little type player who is a hooker that defends, but also has tries in him and attacking stats. So there could be a situation where I compare him to potentially like a Sonny Luke situation where he'll play 30 minutes, 35 minutes. One day, fluke of 50. Sonny Luke was like average 57 last year based on one game or something, right? I'm not saying that'll happen, but he's the type of guy that I can just see earning more minutes as the season goes on. He'll be a kind of like, you're not going to play him. He's going to kind of be a bit of a crappy cash cow for the first few weeks, but I'd rather get him in now and hope that the talent wins out over time and just cops slow rises than to bother trying to bring him in later. And same for Riley Smith if he gets named at Para, who's kind of following a similar trajectory.
So Canberra have a good forward pack too. I'll throw that in. So he's behind a good pack. If you can attack, like you say, defensive work rates there, like you say, then he could be a good slow burn. My one caveat on this is if you're light at hooker and you're running, say, I don't know, you got Mama Zealous there and maybe you got Connor Watson as well. He could get him as a third hooker. But if you're running what I'm running, which is Harry Grant, Connor Watson, and Mama Zealous, I'm not going to get the fourth hooker. I'll throw a quick question to you. So 10 seconds or less, Owen Paddy versus Corey Pegs. Where are you taking?
Owen Paddy, 230K, better fantasy scoring potential and more attacking upside.
Bang, bang, bang. All right, him over Corey Pegs is a big call there, man. Halasema's up next, and I like the talent on Halasema. I just don't love the situation. So after seeing the team list for round one, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, all right, James Fisher-Harris starting, Mitch Barnett starting, Aaron Clark starting. All these guys can soak up big minutes. Then you have Dylan Walker on the bench. He's going to steal a good 50 to 60 middle forward minutes as well. So you've got a situation where there's not a lot of minutes to go around, and then you have a bench that's got some talent on it. So Jackson Ford, for example, he's no slouch. He plays in the middle as well. He'll get his fair share of minutes. So for Halasema, the pathway to anything over 30 minutes is very, very murky. So for me, he's just not a guy I can prioritize. He's also only available on the edge, which is a bit messy because you'd probably want him with that dual position available. But I will caveat this with he was in great form in the trials, so maybe he does earn more minutes. I just don't see the pathway to it.
Yeah, I think Warriors are too stacked. I love the talent. I know you were big on him all preseason, just on how he played. Just don't think it really eventuates yet. But I would love it for the case that he goes out and plays big minutes round one, and I can trade him in week 2 because, like, edges is the place I'm really struggling, and a good cash cow on the edge, like I'd love that.
Or if there's an injury at some point, suspension, all that sort of thing too. I don't know why Healy is up here so high owned, but Jezewski's one who just got a photo as we were doing this. Wow. That's beautiful.
That's big.
Stunning shot too. Very, very model-esque. But Jezewski looking like starting in the back row. His historical average, I can't remember the exact number. I remember looking at it a few weeks ago. It's like 28 or something like that when he starts in the back row. So not a fantasy producer. Next to no job security. If Piakura is on the bench, Piakura will come on for Jezewski and they'll split time half and half. So essentially, he's Burbo last year, but without the center eligibility. So for me, I'm not having Jezewski in many of my teams. But on the other side of it, if he flukes some attacking plays, he's got great playmakers in Walsh, Ben Hunt, Reynolds, who could feed him through holes, then maybe he does make some cash. I just am not inspired enough by it unless we see a round one team list that doesn't have Piakura on the bench.
Yeah, I'm off him. I mean, he's in concussion protocols at the moment, so he even knows if he's ready for round one. I think, look, I don't have much more to add, but then if you look at the Footy Statistics website and search his name, I think it's really funny. So shout out to the devs. The first thing that pops up is, if you search his name, is "Have you considered therapy?" I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's a good one from the devs. Clearly, the devs are not hot on Big Jack over here, but I don't disagree with them. I think avoid. So, yeah, stay away from this one.
Hard skip. Samrani, definitely a skip. Metiele, definitely a skip. Stafford Towers, I'm going to talk about here. I'll throw it to you, man, because there's a bit of competition between him and Jack Bird, but if he gets a start, he's surely a buy, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's a bit of an inconsistent scorer. He played a few games last year, got injured in all. He played 3 games last year, got injured in all 3. But I think when you think of Savatoa, everyone thinks about the classic he put against Valentine Holmes, where he scored 100 points and everyone bought him in and then he never reproduced. But I think with Stafford Toa, he's generally can be safe for a mid-30s average, and at 250k, it's good. I think he's a good player as well. Like I think he's quite underrated. He definitely is defensively maybe a bit suspect, but with the ball in hand, very solid. And I think obviously with Olam, with potentially medically retiring, medical retirement, is that that spot opens up, and they've got Dewey playing center at one side. Nathan's obviously hurt for the first 6 to 8 weeks. It's a question of really, do you think Junior Tupou is left to the Dolphins? Is it Stafford Toa playing center and Bird keeps the middle role where he's been training, or is it Bird that plays center and Stafford Toa is out of the side? I think, look, if it's Toa starting and Bird bench, get Toa in, back the scoring potential and a base price. But if he's not there, I think it's an easy one to avoid. And honestly, on a personal level, I wouldn't mind Bird being at center and Toa not making the team, just so I don't have to have like 7 base price centers in my team round one.
Well, you got to pick and choose, right? Like right now, he's not in my team, and I'd find it hard to make space if everything goes how I think it'll go. But he's definitely a buy. Then down this list, there's a few guys here who are getting starting spots, bench spots. So V Malgar, I don't expect the minutes to be there. Laban was talked about, but he's not going to get those minutes. Charlie Geimer is one to keep an eye on. I reckon he'll be a bench middle, so I don't see that being super productive.
And it's interesting you say that. Yeah, with Geimer, he played bench middle, but then he played on the edge for most of the preseason. But it's really hard to tell because it's really, I mean, the thing, he didn't look great on the edge. I know a lot of Para fans are hyping him up to start on the edge, but he didn't look good. On the flip side, Kelma didn't look good. I think Gideon or Kitioni Kartanga, who played week 1, looked like pretty shit. The thing is,
what about Ryan Madison and Bryce Cartwright? Like, why are they not?
They've got. Cardi was extended bench, and then Kartanga was like a late withdrawal, and then Cardi came in. Actually, I don't even. I'll have to check and update the comments, but I can't even remember if it was Cardi who came in to start, if it was Latu Fainu. Not Latu Fainu, sorry, William Latu, who I think might have got the start. I can't remember if it was him.
Cardi came off the bench,
Cardi, So it's a weird one. I think from all reports that in training that it's Kartanga and Kelma that are trialing on the edge, but Kartanga's potentially injured. And the thing with Kartanga and Kelma playing on the edges, they're both very similar players who love a mistake, love a missed tackle, like attacking upside heavy. Geimer is a bit more hard-nosed, old school kind of player, like work hard, make the ruck meters, defend soundly. So there's a chance, but I think it's a simple question. If he gets named edge, just get him. If not, skip him.
Yep, agree with that completely. I still think it should be Madison and Cartwright on the edges, but I'm not the coach.
Agree.
And down this list, it's pretty dry for a bit, but we do have a super pod for you. Actually, I'll throw Valepu in there just quickly. He looked fantastic basically every time he stepped on the field. So if he gets minutes at some point, he's a guy you look at, but I can't see the minutes being great from the jump. They brought a Toka Manu in who's going to soak up a bunch of minutes. So probably a hard one to buy. But at some point in his career, he will be a guy we all look at. So we'll slide past him to, I'll just say Derby 2. Don't buy Derby. I think he's lost that spot.
What about Wiramu Greg, your boy?
Let's skip that one. But Fletcher, there's these little whispers and rumors that are coming through that Fletcher will start at lock for South Sydney. You just got to keep your eye on it, right? Like, I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, be ready to go. It would be fantastic.
I've seen the rumor Fletcher, Edge, Duncan, middle. I've seen the rumor that Lachlan, Hubner in playing at lock, and seen heaps of rumors for the Souths pack. Who knows?
People
really
just making things up about South Sydney.
That's like a whole podcast, mate.
It's getting their reps, mate. And then look down the list. Let's roll down the bottom. So
Surely a bit of
keep an eye on him. Anyone could start at the South really at this stage. Kautonga is one to keep an eye on too. So a bit of talk could be. And why is he the Bulldogs with no picture?
Yeah, they haven't even updated that.
The starting back row at Parramatta. He'll have centre back row dual position. He's at 0.8% ownership. So if he gets that, be ready to go. But if he doesn't get that spot, then you got nothing to worry about.
And I will throw out statistically for those looking for stats. He played for Fiji off the bench last year for 2 games. I think it was 35 and 49. 49 was with the try, whereas I think his minutes at the Dogs when he's played over the years, kind of 20 minutes. So I think he's going to be a guy if he gets a starting role and plays 50, 60 minutes, which is what he did for Fiji. I think he played 45, 50 minutes on the bench. That reliant on attacking upside, but he played about 40 minutes in Para's first trial against the Knights, and he was the type of player who made quite a few errors, but it was because he was looking to offload every time. So I think he's going to have up and down games. Almost feel like it's going to be the exact same scoring profile as a guy like Kelma, but with less job security.
Okay, there you go. But base price, man, that's the exciting bit, whereas Kelma's a bit pricey. And then down the bottom of the list here, I mean, there's a lot of people mentioning Jaden Beryl every year.
Yeah.
But he's not going to get the spot.
Shibasaki, I think I saw that apparently might be.
There he is.
Yeah, that's his brother, I think. Where's
oh no,
Gahamet? Is he best price?
Yeah. He's somewhere down here, but Shibasaki is probably going to be the starter for round 1. So Katoni Staggs misses. I'll just roll
4
up
to
to
5
top.
weeks. Yeah,
but he misses. So he misses a good chunk of time, and it's a pretty good Broncos side. So,
yep. And he's kind of average.
He's more expensive. Let's grab that. I think he's in the 300.
Really? I thought his base price. Rule him out then.
Where is he?
No, I could be wrong. He's 257K. Maybe he's not even in the system yet.
That's strange. Anyway, Shibasaki, not this one. I'm going to put him up, but it's the other Shibasaki for the Broncos. Looks like the starter. And to be honest, he was looking like the starter before Katoni Staggs' injury. So there was talk that he'd won the spot over Dean Mariner. So if he's 257K, then we definitely start with him. If he's on that Broncos side, right? Like Ben Hunt is there. There's going to be plenty of attack to go around. So as much as he's not a historically good fantasy scorer, he's probably a guy we have to look at.
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, like footy statistics is kind of outdated. It still says at the Rabbits, but he's averaged 32 playing 80 minutes at center of the park. So it really depends what they place him at. But he should have a 4 to 5 week run, which is decent to make 100K. But
another base Mariner, then that's even better. But
I can't believe it. I mean, Mariner played so well, and he's such a talent. But I just add it to another low security 250K center if he pops up.
Another one.
Add to my woes.
It'd be a defensive focus thing. Like Madge would be looking at defense in the preseason or something like that.
Yeah.
We'll cover off a couple of these guys too, and really just shout out if there's a guy you want to talk about here. So move up.
I mean, you went past him, but it was Takeaho while I saw his name.
Yeah, I was catching up to him before.
Yeah. I mean, just while I saw him, I think he was. He's apparently Seabold's come out and said he's going to start based on his preseason. Historically, not bad PPM. I think it's 0.9. Priced at 31. Needs 50 minutes to get the value. If you think he gets 50 plus minutes, over guys like Josh Alloway, I think Paseka is fine. Like he was cleared to play round 1. But if you think Takeaho gets 50 plus minutes, then get on him. But I think he's going to get 40 minutes for about 35 points and a little bit of value, but not a lot.
Yep. I agree with you there completely. I think you've nailed that. Then Brendan Hands, we can mention here too. Probably not going to be the only hooker in the Para squad, but if he is the only hooker at Para, you could start with him. He'll probably average in the low 40s. So a bit of value there.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like it's the exact same as last year, isn't it? Like Lussick versus Hands. Now you've got Riley Smith thrown in there. I'm kind of hoping it's like Hands and Riley. And then
as a Para fan, I agree with you. Yeah.
In which case, I think Hands plays 60 minutes and Riley 20. But Hands is the type of player. His PPM is kind of trash, so he needs 80 minutes. But let's see.
Yeah, he's not the guy. You can make a case for Tass as well. He's been an option at this price for a lot in his career.
He's been goal kicking, so I don't know. Does he goal kick week 1? What do you reckon? Is it Humphreys or who's it?
I mean, Dodds will goal kick, right? When he comes back?
I don't know. I think it's hard to tell. But I don't even know.
Overseas, but then he lost the goal kicking, and there was a few things there. It's very hard to read at South Sydney. I feel like they don't even know what's happening. But if he goal kicks, that's an extra, 1 or 2 points a week with how South is playing. No, it's probably an extra 6 points a week, right? So that doubles his average, which I've got to.
It's probably not worth buying at 325K when Latrell's coming back in 4, 5, 6 weeks. So
yeah, I agree. We can skip him. Then is there anyone else we want to touch on here? Ilias is one I just have to mention briefly, and I reckon we're going to finish on Ilias here. So kick meters in that final trial game. Ilias had 297. Flanagan had 2 more kick meters than I had that day. 2. Like nothing. So Ilias was absolutely dominant in terms of kicking in that last trial. He was dominant in the first one too. So he's the dominant kicker there at St. George. And it feels like Flanagan's playing more that loose 6 role, which could lead to some decent points when you factor in that Ilias is also quite a solid defender. But the upside is limited. I just don't see him going past, like at his absolute best, 550K. I don't see him going past that sort of number. So he could potentially be value, but he could also just plot around and slow burn. And for 400K, it's a massive drain on your squad to have a guy like that just floating there for ages.
I think if it wasn't for the fact that you've got like Metcalf, Cole, Duffy, all these guys, you could consider him. But I think he's probably the least exciting of them. It's kind of strange that I feel that he's dominating kick meters even more than Ben Hunt. That was versus Flanagan, but okay, interesting. Getting sidetracked as we usually do. Interesting bit of law that I read in the Australian the other day. So Shane Flanagan had an interview where he straight up came out and said, "Carl Flanagan's not an elite talent. Like he's my son, but like he's not an elite talent. And he's just a hard worker and he won't let you down." So he pretty much just said like, he's good defensively, but not great in attack. So maybe that means they're going to rely on Ilias for a bit more attack. But in the same article, he pretty much like trashed on like their bench, their Emre Gula. They're like, yeah, we want some props. Gula will do the job. He's not like a game busting prop. I'm like, everyone in his squad is just kind of backhand complimenting them.
Yeah, they're mid.
Funny article, a really funny article. If anyone's subscribed to the Australian or wants to share it in the comments, like quite funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reason I bring it up is maybe they're suggesting Ilias just really runs the offense through him. And I think Dragons have looked pretty good. So there's some upside, but just too many half options to consider this year. That's before even considering like Munster and Luai.
Yeah, they went and got him 100%. I guess Gutho there as well. He kind of helps because he's a bit of a fullback hybrid to the halves. So he can help them play make a bit. They've got a pretty solid defensive structure. They should be good. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think you can jump on Ilias.
You said they went and got him. In that same article that I mentioned, funnily enough, he was like, "Oh yeah, Ben Hunt left kind of late in the year. There wasn't really much left in the free agent market." So it was a scathing attack on Ilias. I mean, they were like, he kind of said it like, we're happy that he was at least available, but it didn't seem,
at least
it was like not great
the
way he phrased it. Anyway, funny
mate, that is well. All right, well that is cash cows. Our view on all the cash cows. So look, we've probably said yes to a few too many guys. There's going to be priority calls that everyone has to make. So I've enjoyed doing this one. Biz, happy to have you on too. We're going to be doing a bunch more videos through round 1 and through the season. So make sure you like and subscribe to this video and drop a comment below on any pod cash cows you are taking this year. Cheers, guys.